Chapter 4. Anne Meets Mrs. Lynde. The extra bedroom was now Anne's room. It was the first time in her life that she had her very own room with her very own window. On one side of the house, there were apple trees. On the other side, there were cherry trees. Anne danced around the trees. She picked apple blossoms and cherry blossoms and put them in her room. Finally, Marilla said, "That's enough flowers, Anne. We don't want to turn your room into a forest." So Anne ran off to explore a small creek that she had found. Marilla looked out the window and said, "Oh no, here comes Mrs. Lynde." Rachel Lynde was Marilla's neighbor. She was a busybody. Whenever anything new happened in Avonlea, she was the first person to know about it. Marilla watched Mrs. Lynde march up the path and onto the porch. She was a large woman who liked to tell everybody else what to do. Rachel Lynde spoke first. "I've heard some very surprising news," she said. "What news have you heard?" asked Marilla. She knew that Rachel was talking about Anne. Rachel said, "I've heard that you and Matthew are adopting an orphan girl. I couldn't believe my ears." "It's true," said Marilla. Rachel shook her head and said, "Marilla, you should have asked for my advice. It's a risky thing to bring a strange child into your home," said Rachel. "Just last week, I read about an orphan setting fire to a house." Marilla had known Rachel Lynde for many years. She knew that Rachel had strong ideas about everything. Marilla said, "The girl's name is Anne Shirley. Matthew and I like her a great deal. She is not going to burn down our house." Just at that moment, Anne ran into the front room where Marilla and Mrs. Lynde were talking. Anne was wearing the same old yellow dress that she had worn at the train station. The wind had blown her red hair into a mess. Marilla looked at Anne's face and thought that she had more freckles than ever. Rachel looked at Anne and said, "Well, aren't you a funny-looking thing? Your hair is as red as carrots, and I don't think that I have ever seen so many freckles on one face." Then Rachel spoke to Marilla. "The girl is so skinny and plain-looking." Rachel looked again at Anne and said, "Come over here, child. I want to have a closer look at you." Anne walked over to Rachel. Anne had never felt so angry in all of her life. She felt so angry that her body began to shake. She stared at Rachel Lynde, and then she cried out, "I hate you! I hate you! I hate you! How dare you call me skinny? How dare you make fun of my hair and my face? You are a mean, rude woman," Anne screamed. "How would you like someone to say things like that about you? How would you like it if I told you that you are fat and ugly?" yelled Anne. "I will never forgive you. Never, never." Marilla spoke to Anne in a firm voice. "Go up to your room this minute and stay there until I come up for you." Anne ran up the stairs to her bedroom and slammed the door. Now Rachel Lynde was angry. She turned to Marilla and said, "That girl is a wicked child." Marilla was upset also, but she tried to stay calm. She said to Rachel, "Anne is not a wicked child, but she does get angry quickly. And really, Rachel, you shouldn't have said those unkind things to her." Rachel opened the front door and walked out of the house. She looked back at Marilla and said, "She's a wicked, wicked girl. I will tell the whole town that you have a wicked girl living here," said Rachel. Marilla watched as Rachel walked away. When Matthew came back for lunch, Marilla told him what had happened. Matthew said to Marilla, "I'm sorry that this happened, but it was Rachel's fault." Marilla said, "Yes, but Anne got too angry. Now she must tell Rachel that she's sorry." Marilla went to Anne's room and opened the door. "Anne Shirley," said Marilla, "you will go to Mrs. Lynde and tell her that you are sorry and ask her to forgive you." "I can never do that," cried Anne. "You can lock me up with a bunch of snakes and feed me only bread and water, but I will never ask Mrs. Lynde to forgive me." "Then you must stay in your room until you change your mind," said Marilla.